My family always comes first. You come last. My daughter-in-law Carolyn said it calmly, like she was reading from a recipe card. No hesitation, no apology. Please listen until the end and click on the subscribe button and tell me where you're listening from. I need to know if this reaches someone. My son, the boy I carried for 9 months, the child who used to hold my hand crossing streets, stood beside her with his arms folded across his chest. I waited for Scott to interrupt her, to defend me, to remember who I was to him. But he didn't. He just nodded, slow and deliberate, like he'd been rehearsing this moment. Something inside me broke then, not loudly, not dramatically. It was quiet, like ice cracking on a frozen lake, a sound you feel more than hear. I smiled. A small, polite smile. Good to know, I said. And in that moment, sitting at their dining room table surrounded by the life I'd helped them build, I made a decision. If I was always going to be last in their hearts, then they would no longer be first in mine. That night, I drove back to my apartment alone. 2 cramped rooms on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like cleaning solution and old carpet. The walls were Builder beige, water-stained near the ceiling. The vinyl flooring cracked and peeled at the edges. From my window, I could see the dumpsters behind the Chinese restaurant next door, and a bus stop where teenagers gathered at night. No garden, no natural light, no space to breathe. But it was what I could afford after I sold them my house. My house. The house where I raised Scott. 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a kitchen with yellow curtains, and enough counter space to roll out pie dough. A backyard with a maple tree that turned gold every October. The house my husband and I bought when Scott was 2 years old. I sold it 6 years ago, 2 years after my husband died. Scott told me he and Carolyn needed help with their down payment. They'd found the perfect place, great schools, safe neighborhood, room for the kids to grow. Mom, you don't need all that space anymore. Why not invest in our future? You'll always have a place with us. I believed him. I gave them $170,000, almost everything. I kept $28,000 for this apartment and living expenses. They bought a 4-bedroom colonial in a gated community. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, a finished basement, a backyard with a deck, and a playset for the grandkids. I used to visit every Sunday. I'd arrive at 9 in the morning with grocery bags full of food I'd spent Saturday preparing. Pot roast, green bean casserole, homemade rolls. I'd watch Emma and Tyler while Scott worked in his home office and Carolyn went to her yoga class, then brunch with her book club, then errands that somehow took all afternoon. I'd feed the kids lunch. I'd help Tyler with his homework. I'd braid Emma's hair. I'd fold the laundry piled on the couch. I'd scrub the sticky spots off the kitchen floor. When Scott and Carolyn came home, they'd thank me with distracted smiles. Scott would glance up from his phone. Carolyn would say, "You're a lifesaver, Dorothy," in the same tone she used with the pizza delivery guy. I was part of the house, like the furniture, like the Wi-Fi router, necessary, useful, easily forgotten. But the grandkids loved me. Emma is 11, bright and talkative, with Scott's dark eyes. She'd run to the door when I arrived. "Grandma, I missed you." Tyler is 7, quieter, thoughtful. He'd show me the Lego spaceships he built, explaining every detail with careful precision. Those moments made everything else bearable. But 4 months ago, something shifted. Scott's phone calls became shorter, more formal. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" As if I needed a reason to call my own son. Carolyn stopped responding to my texts. When I suggested coming over, there was always a reason I couldn't. "We've got plans. The kids have activities. Maybe next week." 3 Sundays passed, then 4. No one called, so I called them. "Can I come see the grandkids this weekend?" Scott sighed, audible even through the phone. "Mom, Carolyn and I talked. And we think it's better if we keep weekends for family time right now. Family time, as if I weren't family. I stopped calling after that. I waited for them to reach out first. Weeks turned into months. Then yesterday, Scott called. His voice sounded too friendly, too careful. "Mum, we'd like to have you over for dinner tomorrow night. It's been too long. Carolyn's making something special." I hesitated. Something felt off, but I wanted to believe they'd missed me, that they'd remembered everything I'd done for them. I said yes. I arrived at 6:30, exactly on time. I'd bought a small bouquet of flowers from the grocery store and worn the navy blouse Emma said she liked. I rang the doorbell. Carolyn answered. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater and dark jeans, her hair blown out in perfect waves. She smiled, a tight, practiced smile. "Dorothy, come in." The house was immaculate. The floors gleamed. The countertops were clear. Soft music played from hidden speakers. Everything looked like a staged photograph. All of it bought with my money. Scott appeared from the kitchen, khakis and a button-down shirt. He kissed my cheek. "Hey, Mum. Good to see you." "Where are the kids?" I asked. "At Carolyn's mother's," he said. "We wanted tonight to be just us. You know, a chance to really talk." Something cold settled in my stomach. We sat at the dining room table. Carolyn brought out chicken, roasted vegetables, a salad with cranberries and goat cheese. She poured white wine into crystal glasses. "To family," Scott said, raising his glass. I raised mine but didn't drink. We ate in near silence, forks scraping plates, ice cubes shifting in water glasses. The hum of the refrigerator. Every sound felt amplified, wrong. Finally, Scott set down his fork. He glanced at Carolyn. She nodded. "Mum, we wanted to talk to you about something important." I put down my fork. My hands were trembling. "Carolyn and I have been talking, and we think we need to set some clearer boundaries, for everyone's sake." "Boundaries?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "We have our own family to focus on now. Emma, Tyler, our home, our future, and we need to make that our priority." I hadn't asked to be their priority. I'd only wanted to be included. Carolyn leaned forward, her expression practiced, sympathetic. "We love you, Dorothy, but you have to understand, our family comes first." She paused, looked me directly in the eyes. "You come last." The words hung in the air like smoke. I turned to Scott. Surely he'd say something. Surely my own son would tell his wife that I wasn't last, that I mattered, that after everything I'd sacrificed. But Scott just sat there, arms crossed, silent, and then slowly, he nodded. That was the moment something inside me finally gave way. I could have cried, I could have shouted, I could have begged them to remember who I was, what I'd done, how much I'd given up. Instead, I picked up my wine glass, took a small sip, set it down gently. I smiled. "Good to know," I said. Scott blinked. Carolyn's expression flickered. Confusion, maybe disappointment. They'd expected tears, guilt, a scene they could later describe as me being dramatic or unreasonable. I gave them nothing. I stood, folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate. "Thank you for dinner. It was lovely." I walked to the door, grabbed my purse and keys. "Mom," Scott started. I turned, looked at him, really looked at him. "I heard you both very clearly. I appreciate the honesty." I walked out, got into my car, a 12-year-old Honda, with a dent in the passenger door and a check engine light that's been on for 6 months. I started the engine and drove through quiet streets back to my apartment. I didn't cry. I sat on my worn couch, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a face. The streetlight outside cast shadows through the blinds. The upstairs neighbor's footsteps creaked across the floor. And I thought about how I got here. I thought about the day Scott was born. It was August, the hottest summer on record. The hospital air conditioning had broken down that morning. I labored for 14 hours in a room that felt like an oven. My husband Richard holding my hand through every contraction, whispering that I was doing great, that he loved me, that soon we'd meet our son. When the nurse finally placed Scott in my arms, his face was red and scrunched, his tiny fists waving. Richard cried. I'd never seen him cry before. We named him after Richard's father, a man who'd worked 3 jobs to put his kids through school. I didn't know then that I'd spend the next 50 years doing the same. Richard died when Scott was 17. A heart attack at his desk at the accounting firm. No warning. One moment he was there, solid and dependable, the foundation of everything. The next moment, gone. Scott fell apart. He'd always been sensitive, the kind of boy who cried at movies and brought home injured birds. After his father died, he stopped going to classes. Stopped eating properly. I'd find him at 2 in the morning, sitting in the garage where Richard's tools still hung on the pegboard, just staring. I held him together. I had to. I worked mornings at the elementary school cafeteria and evenings cleaning offices downtown. I came home smelling like industrial cleaner and mystery meat, my knees aching, my hands raw. But I made sure Scott had what he needed. Therapy appointments I couldn't really afford. A college fund I rebuilt dollar by dollar. Dinner on the table every night, even when I was too exhausted to eat it myself. He graduated high school. Barely. He got into state college, on his 3rd try applying. I was so proud I cried at his acceptance letter. College was harder. Scott struggled with deadlines, with structure, with everything. He'd call me sobbing at midnight because he'd failed another exam. I'd drive 2 hours to campus, bring him home for weekends, help him write papers, remind him to eat, to sleep, to keep going. You can do this, sweetheart. I believe in you. He graduated at 24, 2 years late, with a degree in business he didn't know what to do with. Then came the job struggles, the credit card debt, the car repossession. Every few months, another crisis, another frantic call. Mom, I messed up. Can you help? And I always did. I paid off $8,000 in credit card debt when he was 26. I co-signed a loan for a used car when no one else would. I let him move back home for a few months that turned into 2 years. I never said no. How could I? He was my son, my whole world, the only family I had left. He met Carolyn when he was 29 at a friend's barbecue. She was pretty, confident, employed. She worked in hospital administration and talked about 5-year plans. She seemed to stabilize him. He smiled more, stood straighter. I was grateful. When Scott brought her to Sunday dinner, I made her favorite foods. She'd mentioned loving lasagna. I asked about her family, her work, her dreams. I wanted her to feel welcome. Wanted her to know that loving my son meant joining our family, small as it was. When they got engaged, I cried happy tears. When they married, I paid for the rehearsal dinner, $3,200 I'd been saving for a new roof. It didn't matter. Scott was happy. That was enough. When Emma was born, I was in the delivery room. When Tyler came 2 years later, I took a week off work to stay with them, cooking meals, doing laundry, rocking a colicky baby at 3 in the morning while Carolyn slept. You're a godsend, Dorothy, she'd said. I became the person they called when they needed something. Always, every time. Babysitter, cook, housekeeper, emergency contact, bank. I didn't mind. This was what mothers did. This was love. My identity wrapped itself around being needed, around being useful, around being the person Scott could count on, always, the way he'd counted on me since the day he was born. I thought that's what would keep us close. I thought that's what would protect me from ever being alone. I was wrong. The change didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, like winter creeping in. So slow you don't notice until suddenly you're shivering and can't remember when you last felt warm. It started about a year after they moved into the house. Small things. Easy to dismiss. Scott's voice on the phone shifted. The warmth drained out of it. Where he used to call just to chat, Hey Mom, guess what Tyler did today? Now his calls were transactional. Brief. Did you need something? I'm kind of in the middle of something. As if I were interrupting, as if hearing from his mother was an inconvenience. Carolyn's smile changed too. It had always been polite, a little practiced, but now it felt like plastic. Thin, breakable. When I'd arrive on Sundays, she'd greet me at the door with that smile and say, "Dorothy, hi." In a tone that sounded like she was greeting a door-to-door salesman. She was too polite to turn away. The visits became less frequent. First every Sunday, then every other Sunday, then once a month. They always had reasons. We've got a birthday party. The kids have activities. We're going to Carolyn's parents. I tried not to take it personally, but then the kids stopped calling me Grandma. Emma said it first. I'd brought over a pot of chicken soup. Tyler had been sick with a cold. And when I handed it to her, she said, "Thanks, Dorothy," in that casual way children speak when they're mimicking adults. Not Grandma. Dorothy. "Sweetie, you can call me Grandma," I said gently. She looked uncomfortable, glanced toward the kitchen where Carolyn was unloading the dishwasher. "Mom says it's more respectful to use your name." Tyler followed his sister's lead. Within a month, I was Dorothy to both of them. It shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. It was just a word, but it felt like a demotion, like I was being reassigned from family to acquaintance. I tried harder. I showed up with meals I'd spent hours preparing: pot roast with carrots and potatoes, homemade mac and cheese, apple pie from scratch. I offered to help with anything they needed: grocery shopping, yard work, organizing the garage. Carolyn accepted my help with that same plastic smile, but there was impatience underneath it now. Irritation. One afternoon, I was folding laundry in their living room while Carolyn scrolled through her phone on the couch. I mentioned that Emma had grown out of her winter coat. I'd noticed it was too short in the sleeves. "I can take her shopping this weekend if you'd like," I offered. "Get her something warm before it gets too cold." Carolyn didn't look up from her phone. "We've got it handled, Dorothy." "It's no trouble. I'd love to spend time with her." "I said we've got it handled." The sharpness in her voice startled me. I folded the last towel in silence. Scott was worse in some ways because he said nothing at all. When Carolyn snapped at me, he'd be in the next room pretending not to hear. When I'd suggest plans, maybe we could all go to the park, take the kids to the zoo, he'd nod vaguely and say, "Yeah, maybe," in a tone that meant no. He never defended me, never told Carolyn to be kinder, never acknowledged that I was trying. He just allowed it, passively, as if I were a problem he didn't have the energy to solve. I started to feel it in my body, a tightness in my chest when I drove to their house, a knot in my stomach when I called, and it rang too many times before someone answered. A shame I couldn't name when Carolyn looked at me like I was something she had to tolerate. I wasn't family anymore. I was an obligation, a chore, something to be managed and endured. The woman who'd given them everything had become the burden they wished would go away. And the worst part? I kept showing up anyway, kept bringing food, kept offering help, kept hoping that if I just tried hard enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, they'd see me again the way they used to. Or maybe the way I'd always wanted them to see me, as someone who mattered. But I didn't matter, not anymore. And I think part of me knew it. That's why, when Scott called that Tuesday afternoon, something in his voice made me pause. "Mom, hi, how are you?" Too polite, too measured, like he'd rehearsed it. "I'm fine, sweetheart. How are the kids?" "They're great. Listen, Carolyn and I were talking, and we'd really love to have you over for dinner this Saturday. Sort of a family thing. It's been too long." Family thing. The words should have warmed me. Instead, they felt cold. "Oh, that would be nice." "Great. How's 6:30? "Perfect. Should I bring anything?" No, just yourself. We'll take care of everything." He hung up quickly after that. I sat holding the phone, staring at the water-stained wall. Something felt off, wrong, but I couldn't name it. Maybe I didn't want to. Maybe I wanted so desperately to believe they'd missed me, that they'd realized how distant they'd been, that this was an olive branch, a chance to repair what had been breaking between us. I spent Saturday morning preparing. I bought a card from the drugstore, one with flowers on the front that said, "Family is forever." I tucked a $50 bill inside for each of the kids. It was more than I could afford, but I wanted them to know I was thinking of them. I wore the navy blouse Emma had complimented once, the one with the small pearl buttons. I put on lipstick, brushed my hair until it cooperated. I wanted to look nice, wanted them to be glad they'd invited me. I arrived at 6:30 exactly. The porch light was on, but the windows were dark except for the kitchen. No cars in the driveway besides Scott's SUV and Carolyn's sedan. I rang the doorbell, holding the card and the flowers I'd brought, a small bouquet of daisies from the grocery store. Scott answered, button-down shirt, clean jeans. He looked tired. "Hey, Mum, come on in." The house was quiet, too quiet. No music, no laughter, no sound of the kids playing upstairs. The dining room table was set, but only for three. 3 white plates, 3 wine glasses, 3 folded napkins, no centerpiece, no candles, no decorations of any kind. "Where are Emma and Tyler?" I asked. "At Carolyn's mom's for the night," Scott said. "We thought it would be good to have some adult time, just the 3 of us." My stomach dropped. Carolyn emerged from the kitchen carrying a roasted chicken on a platter. She'd dressed up too, a burgundy sweater, dark slacks. Her hair was pulled back tightly. "Dorothy, thanks for coming." That smile again. Plastic. We sat. They served food, chicken, rice, steamed broccoli. Everything looked nice but felt staged. Wrong. We ate in near silence. I tried to make conversation, asked about work, about the kids' school. Got one-word answers. Finally, Scott set down his fork, glanced at Carolyn. She nodded slightly. "Mum, we asked you here because we need to talk about something." The chicken turned to dust in my mouth. "Carolyn and I have been discussing our family dynamic, and we think it's important to establish some clearer boundaries." "Boundaries?" I set down my fork. My hands were shaking. Carolyn leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Dorothy, we love you, but we need you to understand that we have our own family now, our own priorities." "You've been very involved," Scott continued, "and we appreciate everything you've done. But it's gotten to be too much. Too much." The words hit like a slap. "I don't understand. I only come when you ask me to." "It's not just the visits," Carolyn interrupted. "It's the calls, the texts, the constant offers to help. We need space to raise our children our way, to make our own decisions without feeling like we're being watched. Watched. As if loving them was surveillance. We need you to respect that our nuclear family comes first," Scott said. "Emma, Tyler, Carolyn, and me. That's our priority." I looked around the table, at the 3 plates, the dark windows, the absence of celebration. This wasn't a family dinner. This was an ambush. They'd brought me here to tell me I wasn't wanted, to formalize my exile, to draw a line and place me firmly on the other side of it. "I see," I said quietly, and I did. Finally, painfully, I saw everything. And I did. Finally, painfully, I saw everything. I made it home before the tears came. I sat on my couch in the dark, my coat still on, my purse still clutched in my lap, and I cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears I'd held back at their table. These were ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. I'd given them everything, and it still wasn't enough. I was still too much. At some point, I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I scrolled through my contacts until I found her name. Jacqueline. We'd been friends for 43 years. We met when our sons were in kindergarten together, bonded over school fundraisers and playground duty. She'd been a family law attorney before she retired, sharp, practical, unsentimental, everything I wasn't. She answered on the second ring. "Dorothy, it's almost 11. What's wrong?" I couldn't speak at first. The sobs came back. "Dorothy, talk to me. Are you hurt? Do I need to call someone?" "They don't want me," I finally choked out. "Jacqueline, they don't want me anymore." "Who doesn't want you? Scott?" "Scott and Carolyn. They invited me to dinner and it was an ambush. They told me I'm too involved, that I need to respect boundaries, that their family comes first and My voice broke. "I come last." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm coming over." "No, it's late. You don't have to." "I'm already getting my keys. Put the kettle on." She arrived 20 minutes later in sweatpants and a fleece jacket, her grey hair pulled into a messy bun. She took one look at me and pulled me into a hug. We sat at my tiny kitchen table. She made tea while I recounted everything. The dinner, the speech, the way Scott had just sat there nodding while his wife told me I didn't matter. Jacqueline listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker. "Dorothy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Have they ever asked you to sign anything? Documents, paperwork, anything official?" I blinked, confused by the shift. Yes, insurance forms, I think, a few months ago. Carolyn said they were updating their policies and needed my information as an emergency contact. "Do you have copies?" "I think so, in the filing cabinet." "Get them, now." Her tone scared me. I pulled out the drawer, found the folder labeled Scott, Important, and handed it to her. Jacqueline put on her reading glasses and started going through the papers. Her jaw tightened, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Dorothy," she said quietly, "this isn't insurance paperwork." "What?" "This is a durable power of attorney, a broad one. It gives them legal authority over your finances, your medical decisions, everything." The room tilted. No, that's not. Carolyn said it was for insurance, in case something happened and they needed to make medical decisions. That would be a healthcare proxy. This is different. This gives them access to your bank accounts, your assets, the ability to make financial decisions on your behalf. She looked up at me, her eyes hard. "Dorothy, when did you sign this?" "March, late March." "And have you checked your bank statements since then?" I hadn't. I barely looked at them. I had my retirement direct deposited, paid my bills, assumed the rest was fine. "I need to see them. Bank statements, credit card statements, anything financial." My hands shook as I gathered the unopened envelopes from the drawer. I'd been too depressed, too distracted to open them. Jacqueline spread them across the table and started opening them methodically. Her expression grew colder with each one. "Dorothy," her voice was very quiet, "there are withdrawals here, multiple withdrawals, amounts ranging from $500 to $2,000, different dates, always just under the threshold that would trigger a fraud alert." "That's not possible. I didn't." "You didn't. They did." The words didn't make sense. My brain refused them. "My son wouldn't steal from me." Jacqueline reached across the table and took my hand. "Dorothy, I know this is hard to hear, but elder financial exploitation is one of the most common forms of abuse in this country, and in 70% of cases, it's committed by family members. Not Scott. He has power of attorney, he has access, and based on what I'm seeing here, he's been using it." The room was spinning. I thought I might be sick. "How could he do this to me?" I whispered. Jacqueline's grip tightened on my hand. "I don't know, but we're going to find out exactly what they've done, and then we're going to fix it." Jacqueline's grip tightened on my hand. "I don't know, but we're going to find out exactly what they've done, and then we're going to fix it." She came back the next morning with her laptop and a legal pad. We spent 3 hours at my kitchen table going through everything. Every bank statement, every credit card bill, every piece of mail I'd shoved into drawers because I was too tired or too sad to deal with it. Jacqueline worked in silence, making notes, her expression growing grimmer with each page. Finally, she sat back and looked at me. "Dorothy, it's worse than I thought." My chest constricted. "How much?" $29,400. That I can confirm so far." The number didn't feel real. It was too large, too impossible. "There are withdrawals going back 7 months. Small amounts at first, 300, 500, then larger ones. The biggest was $2,800, taken out in cash at a branch near their house." I couldn't breathe. "There's more," Jacqueline continued, her voice gentle but firm. "They opened a credit line in your name, $15,000 limit. It's been used for home improvement purchases. Lumber, paint, furniture. There are charges from a contractor. Looks like they renovated something. Maybe Scott's home office." I remembered him mentioning that. New built-in shelves, a desk he'd had custom made. "Finally have a professional space," he'd said proudly, "built with my money, my credit, my name." "Your insurance," Jacqueline said. "Do you have dental coverage through your retirement plan?" "Yes." "Why?" She turned her laptop toward me. "Because there are claims here for cosmetic procedures, veneers, teeth whitening. Total cost, $8,400. The provider is in their zip code." Carolyn. I remembered her new smile, how bright and perfect her teeth looked at the dinner, how she'd smiled that plastic smile while telling me I came last. She'd done it with my insurance. "They stole from me," I whispered. "They looked me in the eye and told me I was a burden while they were stealing from me." Jacqueline closed the laptop. "There's one more thing. I need you to see this, but it's going to be hard." She pulled out her phone and opened her email. "I have a contact who works in IT security. I asked him to do some digging. He was able to access some cached emails from a shared device, probably Scott's laptop. These were in his sent folder." She handed me the phone. The first email was from Scott to Carolyn, dated 3 weeks ago. Subject: Mom situation. "We need to start looking at options. She's getting more dependent and I don't think we can manage this long term. What about those assisted living places you researched? Maybe something state-funded if the private ones are too expensive. We can't keep letting this be a financial drain." My hands started shaking. The next email was Carolyn's response. "I found a few facilities that take Medicaid. If we can get her declared incompetent or show she needs memory care, we could expedite placement. The one in Riverside has availability. It's not great, but it's affordable. Once she's placed, we can handle her assets more efficiently." I couldn't read any more. The phone slipped from my hands onto the table. "They were going to put me away," I said, "like I was something broken, something to dispose of." "It looks that way," Jacqueline said quietly. "They were researching conservatorship. How to have you declared unable to manage your own affairs. If they'd succeeded, they would have had complete control. They could have sold anything you own, accessed anything you have left, and placed you wherever they wanted." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table. All those times I'd thought I was helping Scott build his life, supporting him, loving him. He'd been planning to erase me, not just from his life, from my own. "They called me a financial burden," I whispered. "But they were the ones taking everything." Jacqueline reached across and gripped both my hands. "Dorothy, listen to me. This isn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. They manipulated you. They lied to you. They exploited your trust and your love. How could he do this? He's my son." "I don't know, but we're not going to let them get away with it." I looked up at her, at my friend of 43 years, the only person who'd shown up when I needed someone. "What do we do?" I asked. Jacqueline's expression hardened. "We take back your power, and then we make sure they never do this to anyone else." Jacqueline's expression hardened. "We take back your power, and then we make sure they never do this to anyone else." The next morning, we went to the bank. Jacqueline had prepared everything the night before: paperwork to revoke the power of attorney, forms to freeze my accounts, documentation of the unauthorized withdrawals. She walked beside me into the branch like a general leading troops into battle. The manager, a young woman named Patricia, grew pale as she reviewed the documents. "Mrs. Winters, I'm so sorry this happened. We'll freeze these accounts immediately and open new ones in your name only. We'll also file a fraud report with our security department." "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded stronger than I felt. By noon, it was done. New accounts, new passwords, new cards. The power of attorney, formally revoked and documented with the county clerk. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. We were having coffee at my apartment when my phone rang. Carolyn. I stared at the screen. Jacqueline nodded. "Answer it. I'm right here." I put it on speaker. "Dorothy." Carolyn's voice was sharp, furious. "What the hell did you do? Scott just got a call from the bank saying his access to your accounts has been revoked. They said you filed fraud claims. Are you insane?" My hands trembled, but my voice stayed calm. "I revoked the power of attorney you tricked me into signing." "Tricked you? We were trying to help you manage your finances. You're 70 years old, Dorothy. I can barely what? Afford to live? That's because you stole nearly $30,000 from me." Silence. Then, "We did no such thing. Those were legitimate expenses. Carolyn's veneers, Scott's home office renovation, those were my legitimate expenses." More silence. "You had no right," she finally hissed. "After everything we've done for you." "You told me I came last," I said quietly. "You made it very clear I was a burden you wanted to get rid of. So I'm giving you what you wanted. I'm removing myself from your life. Permanently. Scott's going to call you. Tell Scott that if he wants to speak to me, he can do it through the police. Jacqueline is filing a report this afternoon." I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I had to set the phone down. But I'd done it. I'd stood up to her. Jacqueline squeezed my shoulder. "I'm proud of you." Scott called 17 times that evening. I didn't answer. Finally, he left a voicemail. "Mom, please. I don't know what Carolyn said to you, but you're confused. We were trying to help you. You signed those papers willingly. We never stole anything. Mom, I'm your son. How could you do this to me? How could you believe we'd hurt you?" His voice cracked. He sounded like the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. But he wasn't that boy anymore. Maybe he never had been. The police investigation moved quickly. Detective Ramirez was patient, thorough. She took my statement, reviewed Jacqueline's documentation, contacted the bank. Within a week, she called Scott and Carolyn in for questioning. Jacqueline went with me to the station. We sat in a waiting room with plastic chairs and fluorescent lights while they were interviewed in separate rooms. Scott came out first. His face was red, his jaw tight. He didn't look at me. Detective Ramirez appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Winters, could you come in for a moment?" We followed her into a small office. She closed the door. "Your son denies everything. Says you gave him permission for all withdrawals. Says the power of attorney was your idea because you were worried about your memory." My stomach dropped. "However," she continued, "Mrs. Scott, Carolyn, had a different response." She opened a folder. She broke down during questioning, confessed that they misled you about the nature of the power of attorney. Admitted they accessed your accounts without your knowledge. She also confirmed they were researching care facilities with the intention of having you placed. Relief and grief hit me simultaneously. She confessed everything. She tried to minimize it, said they were desperate, that they had financial pressures. But yes, she confirmed your allegations. I closed my eyes. My son's wife had just confirmed that my son, the boy I'd raised, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "What happens now?" Jacqueline asked. "We move forward with charges: elder financial abuse, fraud, Identity theft. Detective Ramirez looked at me with sympathy. I know this isn't easy, Mrs. Winters, but you did the right thing. I nodded, unable to speak. Outside, in Jacqueline's car, I finally let myself cry. Not for what I'd lost, but for who I'd lost. My son. My son. The story broke 3 days later. I was having breakfast, toast and tea at my small kitchen table, when Jacqueline called. Dorothy, don't panic. But the local news picked up the story. Channel 7. It's already online. My hands went numb. What? Court records are public. A reporter must have been monitoring the filings. I'm coming over. She arrived 20 minutes later with her laptop. We sat on my couch and she pulled up the news website. The headline was stark. Brutal. Local couple accused of exploiting elderly mother. $29K allegedly stolen. Below it, a photo. Scott and Carolyn at some charity event, smiling in formal wear. They looked successful, respectable, happy. The article detailed everything: the power of attorney, the withdrawals, the insurance fraud, the emails about institutionalizing me. It quoted Detective Ramirez. Elder financial abuse is a serious crime. Family members often exploit the trust of their loved ones. This case appears to involve systematic deception over several months. My name was redacted, listed only as the victim, a 70-year-old widow. But Scott and Carolyn were named. Their ages, their address, Scott's business. It's everywhere, Jacqueline said quietly. Facebook, the community forums. People are sharing it. I felt sick, not because I regretted what I'd done, but because now it was real, public, permanent. My private heartbreak had become a spectacle. The community response was swift and merciless. Jacqueline showed me the comments on the neighborhood Facebook group, hundreds of them. I always thought something was off about them. Those poor grandchildren, what kind of people do this to their own mother? Scott Winters used to do my taxes. I'm finding someone else. They sit in the third row at St. Matthew's every Sunday like they're perfect, hypocrites. The church was the first domino to fall. Pastor Michael called me personally to apologize, not for anything he'd done, but for not seeing what was happening. He told me quietly that Scott and Carolyn had stopped attending services, that several members had asked that they be removed from volunteer committees. The school was next. Carolyn had been on the PTA board. She resigned before they could ask her to. Other mothers stopped responding to her texts. Emma's playdate invitations dried up. Scott's business collapsed within 2 weeks. He was a freelance financial consultant. His client list was small, local, built on reputation and trust. When the news broke, 3 clients terminated their contracts immediately. 2 more followed. By the end of the month, he'd lost everyone except one elderly couple who hadn't seen the news. Their neighbors stopped waving, stopped making small talk at the mailbox. The house with the pool, the 3-car garage, the one I'd helped them buy, it became a prison. The court proceedings were quiet, administrative. Scott and Carolyn's attorney negotiated a plea deal. They'd repay every dollar, $29,000 or $400 plus interest. They'd accept probation, community service, and a permanent restraining order. They could not contact me, could not come within 500 feet of me. The order could only be lifted if I, and I alone, requested it. The prosecutor asked if I wanted to give a victim impact statement at sentencing. Jacqueline thought I should. Make them hear what they did to you. But I couldn't. I couldn't stand in a courtroom and look at my son and tell a judge how he'd broken my heart. Some pain is too private for public consumption. Instead, I submitted a written statement, 1 paragraph. I gave my son everything I had, my time, my home, my savings, my love. He repaid me with betrayal. I don't want revenge. I want peace. I want to rebuild my life without fear. I hope someday he understands what he's lost. The judge sentenced them to 3 years probation. 200 hours of community service each, and full restitution. Carolyn was assigned to an elder care facility for her service hours. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Scott was assigned to a financial literacy nonprofit, teaching low-income families to manage money. The judge looked at them before dismissing court. You stole from the person who loved you most. I hope you spend the rest of your lives trying to understand why. After the hearing, Jacqueline and I sat in her car in the courthouse parking lot. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about it. Lighter, I said finally. Like I've been carrying something heavy for so long, I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. She smiled. Good, because you deserve to stand tall, Dorothy. For the first time in years, I believed her. For the first time in years, I believed her. 3 months later, I left the apartment with the water-stained walls and the view of the dumpsters. I'd been scrolling through rental listings late one night when I found it. A small cottage in Seabrook, a coastal town 2 hours north. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a porch that faced the water. The rent was almost the same as what I'd been paying for those 2 cramped rooms downtown. The landlord, a retired teacher named Margaret, showed me around on a sunny Thursday morning. The cottage had hardwood floors, worn smooth by decades of footsteps, windows that actually opened, and the constant sound of waves in the background. It's quiet here, Margaret said. Mostly retirees and artists, people who want peace. I signed the lease that afternoon. My first morning in Seabrook, I woke to the sound of seagulls. I made tea in my new kitchen, small but mine, with a window over the sink where I could see the ocean. I carried the mug out to the porch and sat in the second-hand wicker chair I'd bought at a thrift store. The sky was pale pink and gold. The beach was empty, except for 1 jogger and a man walking his dog. The air smelled like salt and something clean I couldn't name. I sat there for an hour, just breathing. I developed routines slowly, carefully, like I was learning to walk again. Every morning I walked along the beach, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for an hour. I collected shells, not to keep, just to hold for a moment before setting them back down. I watched the sandpipers chase the waves. I let my thoughts come and go like the tide. I started journaling in the afternoons. Nothing profound, just observations. Today the ocean was grey and restless. A child built a sandcastle near the pier. I had soup for lunch and it was enough. I learned that enough could be enough. I began taking my tea on the porch every evening, wrapped in a blanket as the sun set. I'd watch the sky turn orange, then purple, then dark. I'd listen to the waves. Sometimes I'd cry, not from sadness but from something else. Relief, maybe. Or release. I made friends, slowly. Margaret invited me to a book club that met at the library. 6 women, all over 60, all with stories etched into their faces. We read novels and memoirs and argued good-naturedly about endings. A woman named Ruth, who lived 3 cottages down, started joining me on morning walks. She was 74, a former nurse, a widow like me. She didn't ask about my past. She just walked beside me and pointed out the dolphins when they appeared offshore. Look, she'd say, there, see them? And I'd look, and I'd see them. I thought about Scott sometimes, about Emma and Tyler, about the life I'd built around being needed by them. The grief came in waves, unpredictable and sharp. I'd be washing dishes or folding laundry, and suddenly I'd remember Tyler showing me his dinosaur drawings, or Emma hugging me at the door, or Scott as a little boy crawling into my lap. But the grief didn't drown me anymore. I learned to let it come, acknowledge it, and then let it go, back out with the tide. What they did to me was real. The betrayal was real. The loss was real. But so was this. The morning light on the water, the taste of tea on my porch, the sound of Ruth's laughter, the feeling of sand between my toes. I was 70 years old, and for the first time in decades, I was living for myself, not for a husband who'd died, not for a son who'd betrayed me, not for grandchildren I might never see again. For me. One morning, about 6 months after I moved to Seabrook, I woke up and realized something had shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't waiting for Scott to apologize. Wasn't waiting for him to realize what he'd lost. Wasn't waiting to feel whole again. I was whole. Right now. In this small cottage. In this quiet town. In this life, I was building one small choice at a time. I walked down to the beach as the sun rose. The water was calm, glassy, reflecting the pink sky. I stood at the edge where the waves met the sand, and I thought about all the years I'd spent putting myself last. And then I thought, never again. I would help people when I chose to, love people who loved me back, give freely, but never at the cost of myself. I was no longer a woman defined by what she'd sacrificed. I was a woman who'd survived, who'd fought back, who'd chosen herself, and it felt like freedom. I turned back toward my cottage, toward my tea and my journal and my quiet morning, toward my life, finally, blessedly, completely mine. It was August, the hottest summer on record. The hospital air conditioning had broken down that morning. I labored for 14 hours in a room that felt like an oven, my husband Richard holding my hand through every contraction, whispering that I was doing great, that he loved me, that soon we'd meet our son. When,